Do you want to know everything there is to know about professional bass fishing and all the hot fishing spots here in North Idaho? Well, in today's episode, Brandon Palaniuk, professional bass fisherman, going to break it all down for us. Let's go. Hey, welcome to the North Idaho Experience, a podcast of, by, and for the people of North Idaho and those who are North Idaho curious. These are the incredible stories of the people that choose to call North Idaho home. And if you're thinking about making North Idaho your home, give our real estate team a call, text, or email, info@nidexperience.com. Brandon Palaniuk, professional bass fisherman. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I did it right.
You did. You nailed it.
I have his name written out in like phonics over here so I can get it correctly because it does not look the way I said it.
No, we were joking about that.
Yeah,
It's been butchered many, many a times.
So you are a rare exception because you were born and raised here.
Yep.
Congratulations. You're
Thank you. Yeah. Which part's rare? That
dwindling breed. Yeah, that part. Yeah.
You're an OG.
Yeah. OG. Good way to look at it.
Yep.
Yeah. What? I imagine this place has changed so much. I don't even know.
It has.
Are you of the type that embraces that, or is it like,
It's
get off
mixed.
my lawn? Yeah.
It's
Okay.
mixed. I embrace it as long as it's the right people.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's like, my thought has always been, you are welcome to come here, right? We need new people coming here. That's how we continue to grow and new businesses thrive and things like that. But do not come here and try to change what is beautiful about this, right? So if you decided to move here, you moved here for a reason. You know, you loved how clean it was. You loved the fresh air and the beauty of it and the people. And so if you decided to move here, don't come here and try to change the things that you loved in the first place.
I hear that a lot. I can't imagine. I don't think anybody moves here and he's like, you know what this place needs? It needs some more homeless people.
Yeah.
Like, I think we should bring some homeless people.
Yeah, just don't bring with you from where you moved from. Don't bring the things that ruined it there thinking it's going to be different here.
Right.
Because I feel like most people, when they leave wherever they were and they decide to come to North Idaho, it's because you were trying to get away from something.
Yeah.
That, you're like, I want a better quality of life. And I'm at the age where a lot of people, maybe they left, whether it's friends or people I went to school with, is like, you run into them again. They left and then they had kids and decide we're coming back. Right. We don't want to raise our kids anywhere else. They wanted to get away from it and then realized how awesome it was. And that, we've got good school systems and things like that and good options here.
Right. That was me. I couldn't wait to get out of here when I was 18 years old. I grew up in Spokane. Spokane was a lot different back then.
Yeah.
But I left and felt like I'd lived enough places to really be able to intelligently select where I wanted to live and raise a family.
Yeah.
And you miss some of those qualities and then you come back here. And man, I think some people have a tough time when they get here not realizing the small things that lead toward it being a really poor place to raise a family. Yeah. That's where that mix is. Yeah. It's like the broken windows theory. No, man, those small crimes and small things, you got to nip those so they don't turn into the big gigantic
I think that's what people don't realize. I agree with you. Yeah. Like they might not consciously be aware that they're changing it and it's going to end up
exactly
like California.
Exactly.
So we got to be real careful of that. We're pretty fortunate. All the people that call us for real estate, I mean, they're people that watch the show. Like they're the right people.
Yeah.
I know people come, I don't see them. I know people move up here. They probably move to Gaza or something. Like the ones that are, full on blue and
more vacation home style.
I think, and I'm sure others move here, but I mean, we're pretty fortunate in our business is that we don't get calls from those people because we're unapologetically American on here.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
It goes really well. On that note, we're filming this on the January 20th, by the way. The inaugural speech today was fantastic. Did you get a chance to watch it?
I did. I was
pumped, dude.
It was perfect because I live a really busy life. So whether it's my kids or fishing stuff, whatever, I'm always pulled in different directions. But I had to get service done on my truck. So I go to Parker Toyota and I'd go for service and they're like, yeah, it won't be too long. And they had it up on all the screens in the waiting room.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't go anywhere. I didn't have anything to do. And I just got to sit there and just watch it. And it was funny because when I was in there, you got to see kind of a glimpse into North Idaho just the things that we were all just talking about because as he is speaking, there's people in there clapping and cheering. and we're in a waiting room, you know, like at a dealership. But I'm not kidding, like literally clapping and hooting and hollering in the waiting room as it's going on.
Unapologetically American. It is, right? Like,
Yeah.
people are cheering for some other places to be more like this one.
Yeah.
Truly.
I had
which is
chills,
pretty
man.
cool.
I was listening to that, and I was just so funny to watch Biden and Kamala, like, just like, I'm like, I know you want to fucking clap, but you're not, because you have to not, right? Because you can't admit that you guys fucked this all up. But like, I know you want to, because everybody's clapping. And you're the only two people that are not. That's weird,
Right.
But man, I had chills. I was like, I want to like sign me up. Let's go kick down some doors and take these cartel members and throw them back to Mexico. Let's party, man.
Well, and they're talking about, I mean, that's no small feat. You're talking about deploying military assets to the border.
Wild.
To combat some of the organized crime stuff from south of the border.
Yeah.
That's going to be wild.
Fuck around and find out, man.
Right.
Cartels are about to find out.
I
So
know.
I'm pretty excited about it. I'm sure you are.
I'm in my current, dude. I'm in my current, like, my last year of military services this year. And it's like, man.
Yeah.
I'd go deploy for like 2 or 3 weeks. Like, where you've actually got the backing of the people that are up there. Oh, I'd be so freaking
Do you think that will slow the fentanyl trade?
Oh, yeah.
So you might not know this. Eric's current day job is, can I say this on the air?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
it's fine.
So he's in charge of a fentanyl task force up here with the PD.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
Oh, man, it's so much different than the stuff that we had available when we were kids. I mean,
Yeah.
that is the thing now. And I've said this from the get-go is if this election results in me being out of that job, I will be the happiest person on the planet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the number one cause of death in adults from 18 to 45, and it's by a significant margin, and it is all coming from the border. There are other countries that have jumped in, but that's coming across the border, and that's not even disputable, right?
It's mind-blowing.
Yes. You can.
What the thing that scares me about it is that then you have to be cautious about like Halloween candy with your kids.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know,
Right.
it seems like it's worked its way into so many facets, you know, where people like there's traces of it and things that it should not be in, and you know, there's just inherently some bad people in places.
Yeah.
We're fortunate we don't have a lot of them.
Yes.
But like you had mentioned, you know, nipping those things early, like not letting things getting out of control. And hats off to you guys for being ahead of that, or, you know, at least before it becomes a serious problem. Because you look at places, you know, I don't know why I've never been, you know, in a police task force or anything, but I've always been intrigued by like drug use and what it does to communities, and seeing that. And so I watched some pages of, you know, just kind of the heartache, because I think more the psychology side of it, of those people, and like it seems like most of them want to get out of it and they can't.
Oh, dude, you get me talking about this, bro. I'm gonna hijack the whole podcast. But no, I love the direction you went with that, and I go speak at high schools and middle schools because I think it's important to empower our kids with knowledge. They're hard conversations to have. We're talking about their potential death and how that is the primary. I mean, that is very likely to be their reason in today's society.
Yeah.
Right. But you get into that exactly what you're saying, how it hijacks your brain. It's all about dopamine.
Yep.
Your brain craves pleasure, and that's fake dopamine.
Yeah.
It's a fake endorphin that mimics dopamine, but regardless, and your brain craves it and needs it, and you'll do anything for it.
Yeah.
So I agree. I tell all of them in a class, I've never met somebody that was in the back of my car that sat in their classroom as a junior or senior and said, you know what? When I grow up, I want to be a slave to a substance. Right? So it has amazed me over the course of the last 3 or 4, well, really 6, 7 years, but it's amazing how we've let this infiltrate our community and how it's not discussed. It's not on every major news network. It's just starting to get out now. So, man, I hope it puts me out of a job.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
I truly, that'd be the best thing for our community. And our
I wonder how do you think the cartels are going to react to this?
Man, I don't know. I mean, I think they've been in bed with so many high-level officials, and this is not a conspiracy theory. This is just a matter of fact. When you're putting in policies that just make it super easy for them to
A lot of money at play, right?
Billions, hundreds of billions of dollar industry. So
Yeah.
there will be a response because that power grab is, I mean, that's real. That's their lifestyle, and that's everything that they've worked really hard to establish. And they are militant. So I think you're going to have some organizations. They're going to try to leverage local politicians and local state politicians and local cities. I think that's the next big one.
And then the A-10s will fly over the border.
God,
And that'll be it.
You know what? I'm not. I promise not to. I'm not volunteering. Okay,
there's a lot of
tempting
bits
as
of
it
that.
is. It's a young
I'm
man's
too
game.
old.
It's a young man's
too
game.
old. You could. But
No.
yeah, the wives might kill you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Facts. Starting with my own.
Yeah. All right, dude. How did you get into professional bass fishing? See, we were going to talk about bass fishing. It was
Yeah.
coming.
Sorry.
Like, is this something you start with a passion? Obviously, you had a passion for it at a young age, and you've been doing it a long time.
Yeah.
And then I didn't even know. I guess I knew this was a thing, but I didn't realize it was like as big a thing.
I didn't know it was a thing when I was younger. And a lot of people don't, and especially in the Pacific Northwest, like it's just not a thing. We have bass tournaments.
Yeah.
We have some of the best bass fishing in the entire world. It just goes under the radar because we also have world-class trout fishing. And that's really what we're known for. And that's just not as predominantly available across the entire, country. So there's bass everywhere. There's not cold water trout everywhere.
Why bass as opposed to like crappies?
Personally, or just as like a
Both, I guess. Both.
I mean, I think a lot of it is the competition part of it.
Okay.
And then I also think that there's a lot more versatility in the bass side of it, as far as different techniques and how they live, and multiple species and how they have different attitudes and how they live differently. And thankfully we get to see a lot of that up here. So like I got into it initially from my mother and like my grandfather. My dad wasn't around a lot when I was younger, but my mom loved the outdoors. Like she grew up Western Montana, so small town, and then moved over here. She was going to college in Moscow when I was born. So I mean, you can put the pieces of the puzzle together. I probably wasn't on purpose, but that I was fortunate that she loved to hunt, she loved to fish, and she took me and my sister out with her, right? She didn't quit living her life to raise us. She just took us with her on the things she wanted to do. So I think she saw early on that I had this obsession with fishing just in general. So if it was, I tell a story all the time, which I don't remember it. It's just how it was told to me, but we would go hiking into mountain lakes around here, and we'd backpack in, and she had my younger sister, so she couldn't carry both of us. And if she had to carry my sister and I wanted her to carry me, she would talk me into walking by letting me know that there was fishing on the other end of it.
Yeah.
At the end of the trail, there was fishing, and that would motivate me to walk however far I had to walk.
How old are you at that age, roughly?
3, 4 years old, young.
Yeah.
And so that it's always been a motivating factor. Thank God she recognized that early on. And then her best friend married a guy that was into tournament bass fishing. And he was the one that got me started. So she set it up. You guys probably know the name, Jeremy Tripp. He was the one that got me started. So he took me out the first time, and he wasn't very old himself, and I was 8. And then from there, I became obsessed with it.
That's interesting. I actually get jealous of people sometimes that have an obsession that lasts their whole life, because I don't really, I can't think of one thing that I've stuck with forever.
Yeah.
It's just like that itch is always there. You just got to scratch it, huh?
It never goes away. So the one that I mean, that's a good addiction to have, right?
Sure.
But it's
better than fentanyl.
It's that dopamine hit. It's the same thing. Mm-hmm. And the way that it took me a long time to figure this out, but the way I explain it to people when I'm giving seminars or anything is like that split second that it takes for your brain to register that you got a bite, right? So you're holding the fishing rod in your hand, you get a bite, you feel it in your fingertips, and that split second that it takes to travel from your fingertips to your brain, that is the addiction. Mm-hmm. Because then there is this system of like hope or the unknown, that when you set the hook, you don't know what is on the other end of that.
Right.
Line.
How big is that?
Yeah, you're like, how big is it? What is this going to turn into? And then you do that in a competitive format, and it just amplifies that.
Right. Could this be a winner?
Yeah.
Is this going to take?
Is this going to be worth $100,000 or $10,000, or is this going to be, the points that the fish that gets me enough points to win AOI or something like that? Right. So it's such a small thing, but it's like when you realize that's what the addiction is, you can't ever get rid of it. It's never fully satisfied.
It's like gambling, except you're contributing to your chances.
Yeah,
right?
no one
it's like
gambles.
That rush. It's that rush that
Yeah.
you get, but you're contributing to your opportunities and chances.
Yeah, most people don't gamble and say, "Oh, when I win $100,000, I'll just walk away and be done."
Yeah. That's cool.
Are you into hunting as much too? It's I'm just wondering, do you have that predator drive?
It's probably shifted toward hunting more and more.
Yeah.
I've always enjoyed hunting too. Schedule didn't always allow, and I've been so obsessed with bass fishing for so long of my life that just everything else took a standby. You know, it was always, everything else was second thought. So if I was going to go hunting, that was less time on the water. Now that I've been doing it for 15 years for a living, I've kind of transitioned into understanding that September and chasing elk in the mountains around here is therapeutic for me. And it scratches a different itch. It's kind of more of that primal ancestral thing for me.
How long have you been able to use bass fishing as your primary income? Do you have
15 years.
Do you have never not had a side job?
No.
That's wild.
So when I qualified.
That's probably a dream of some
Yeah.
people out there man, that is freedom.
Yep. I qualified. I fished my first professional season at 23 years old, and I've never looked back. And when I did that, I walked away from, all other jobs. And I was fortunate that I had early success, that I was able to build a sponsorship base and things like that. And I hopped on social media early, before a lot of bass fishing did. And so that helped. And I was able to kind of build this community early on and then have success to gain the credibility that people actually believe what I'm saying.
What's like a good salary for a professional bass fisherman? Like if you're at your top of your game, where would one be?
It's one of the biggest issues in our sport. The separation from from the bottom of the standings to the top of the standings. And you've got guys that are not even covering their expenses to guys making $750,000 to maybe $1 million. And so, you're talking a guy that's can't even clear $50,000-$60,000 in sponsorship money to a guy that's potentially making $1 million.
That's quite a difference.
So I would say, anytime you can get into that 150-ish range, you're ahead of the curve and you're doing pretty good, because that's going to allow you to at least make a living. Because until this year, we just passed where we don't have to pay entry fees now. But before, we had $45,000 a year in fixed expenses to fish 9 events. So you had $5,000 per tournament that you had to pay. So you're paying to play. Well, if you cut a check at 50th place, you got $10,000. But that sounds great. But when you have a $5,000 entry fee, you got another $2,000 in travel expenses. Well, there's $7,000 right there. So if you just count that, you got $3,000 profit.
Right.
But that doesn't count your mortgage payment, your
Equipment.
house, your insurance, your health insurance, because we're essentially all small business owners. So you have all of those other expenses wrapped into it. It's pretty easy to wrap up $100,000 into a season pretty quick.
Yeah, and without knowing a lot about it, how big is that? Because that's a significant gap that you're talking about. I'd say the top, 5%?
Yeah, and it's hard because we all have non-disclosure agreements, in our
fair.
sponsorship.
Right,
so
right.
they all have we can't even talk about it amongst each other.
Right. I just wonder, without knowing much about that sport, what's the competitive advantage there? How significant is that? I would imagine by way of the equipment that you can utilize and everything else. I mean, because it seems to me once you get to that level, you're just going to continue to beat the brakes off everybody else that isn't matched.
You're talking like a financial level when you get to. So I would say,
Got you.
he needed some help.
I need a little something.
He got distracted.
Freaking you guys.
I would say equipment wise, everyone's pretty on par.
Yeah.
Because at a minimum, you get to that level, you're probably going to get product. So you've got access to great gear, boats, motors, all of that. The biggest thing is that it allows you to risk a little bit more.
Right.
So if you get into a situation where you have to decide, is it worth me? I may only get 5 or 6 bites, but they may be the ones that I can win with, versus a guy's like, I just need to cash a $10,000 check so that I can get home and buy diapers and pay my mortgage. So if you get to that point where you're at least covering all of your expenses, right? You just say, I've got all my fixed tournament expenses plus all of my life expenses, and you can cover that with sponsorship costs. That just frees up mentally so much for a guy.
You can gamble a little more.
You can gamble a little bit more, and it just opens up the doors.
Are you, is this all over the U.S., or do you have like regions?
It is all over the U.S., but it is predominantly, if you drew a line from Minnesota down to Texas, it's pretty much from there east.
Oh.
So the closest tournament we have ever had to here is 1,000 miles away.
Whoa. So you're traveling a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I'll leave I'm going to leave and we'll be predominantly gone for the next 6 months.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. You take family with you?
Yeah. My wife and my 2 kids travel. We've got a 43-foot fifth wheel that we travel in, and that's what we live in.
Not a hard sale. Oh, we're going to Florida. Yeah, guys,
that's it's really interesting life, man.
Yeah, they just don't, and like our kids, they don't know any different,
right?
I just believe they're a product of their environment. We all are, and just a quick story on that. The funniest part of this is, so last year, my wife and my kids, they would fly home. They can fly home in a day. I can drive home in 2 days from Alabama. It's like 2 17-hour days, but if I do it with them, it's 4 days. Mm-hmm. So if we have a couple weeks off, it's not worth all of us driving home and turn around and driving back. And so I would just leave the camper down in Alabama. I would drive home. They'd fly. Well, they flew back down to Alabama. I picked them up at the airport, and we're pulling into the campground, and my oldest daughter goes, "We're home." Right after we had just left our actual physical house.
Yeah.
And we're pulling into the campground, and she sees the camper, and to her, that's home.
That's cool. I wish there were frequent camper miles like you get on an airline.
Oh gosh, that's beautiful.
That'd be nice.
Okay, so run me through a tournament. I don't understand how any of this works. How do you find the spot? Obviously, there's a science behind it.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a lot of experience involved in that.
Yeah.
Do you know the lakes beforehand, or are you able to study them? Do you get out on the lake?
So at this point, I've been to a lot of the venues because there's things that they need. The organization needs to be able to host a tournament. You got to have enough lodging. You've got to have a big enough boat ramp. We can't just be pulling into a gravel ramp, single ramp, and launching 100+ guys. So you've got to have the correct venue. Then generally the city pays a fee to have us come there. And then you have to have a big enough body of water to hold that tournament, right? Where guys aren't just on top of each other all the time. And so we've been to a lot of the same places now. In 15 years, I've seen a lot of them. But every year we'll, maybe have 1 or 2 new ones that I haven't been to. And then I end up doing a list of kind of study of Google Earth, depending on if it's a body of water where it's a shallow water fishery. I'll use Google Earth a lot. I use my Humminbird Lake Master chart. I can pull it up on my iPad and look at the contour lines. So just like we pull up Google Maps and we drive down the roads and navigate that way, fish use contour lines as their highways and their road system. So it's understanding how those fish move and follow those contour lines based on their seasonal patterns and kind of their habitual movements, right? So they're going to spawn every single year. It's going to be different times of year depending on where they're at in the country, because you got to have this certain amount of warmth and daylight and things like that. So our fish spawn way later than they do in Florida. But when you understand that, then you can kind of map out an idea, and you can look at those contour lines and understand kind of what type of fishery it is. And then it's identifying is it rock, grass, all those things. And then you break it down to, okay, what's been happening in the last couple months? Has the water been falling or rising? Because that's going to change. And then what are the immediate conditions? What's happening today? And then you've got all your different tackle and lures and colors and things to fit those variables. It's like a mathematical equation.
Interesting.
Take all these variables, and so we'll get practice before the tournament starts.
Okay.
So we'll end up with like we usually practice Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then we'll fish full field Thursday, Friday, 100 guys, cut to the top 50 on Saturday, and then top 10 on Sunday.
So do you catch the fish, hold on to it?
Keep them alive.
Keep them alive.
Yep, we get penalized if they die.
Okay.
So
And then-
you keep them alive in the live well. 5 fish. We're allowed to cull those fish out. Most places, 95% of the places we go, catch 5. You catch one that's bigger than your smallest one. You pitch the smallest one out. As long as it's alive, can't throw a dead one back. So as long as it's alive, you throw your smallest one, put the biggest one in, and then you weigh those 5 at the end of the day. And then it's your accumulative weight over the course of those 4 days of the tournament.
Are there some lakes that just make monster bass?
Yeah.
Over others?
For
the
sure.
What's the biggest you ever caught?
12.4 is the biggest one I've ever caught.
At 12 pounds?
12 pounds, 4
Okay.
ounces.
That's a big hog, dude.
Yeah, giant largemouth. I caught that one down in Texas. Texas is, I wish more Fish and Wildlife departments studied Texas Parks and Wildlife because it is amazing. They identified that their state was could be a bass fishing powerhouse and how much that could make an economic impact on their state.
Smart.
And so bass fishing is like a religion down there. And the Texas Parks and Wildlife created the Share Lunker program. And so there are people that they will drive wherever. If you catch a bass in Texas that's 13 pounds or bigger, they will drive anywhere in the state of Texas, which is a pretty dang big state.
Yeah.
And they will pick up that fish from you. They will certify it, and they will actually bring it back, and they use that as the brute stock for their stocking programs for all these bodies of water. So they're constantly stocking their lakes with genetically larger than average fish. And the program's been going on so long now that they can trace back, like say they catch a share lunker. It comes in, they pull a scale, they do the DNA testing. They're tracing them back 6 generations now to like a fish that they had got, created offspring, put them in, right? And 6 generations later, someone catches a 13 plus pounder and they're like, oh,
that's cool.
It's from this share lunker, June 10th, 1989 or something. Like they can.
What does the term share lunker mean?
That's just the term they came up with.
Okay.
So it's got to be 13 pounds or bigger.
And then it's called a share lunker.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the program they use, the term and I guess it's because it's a lunker, like it's a big one, and you're sharing that.
Okay. Makes sense.
So I guess that's kind of how they came up
So
with
they're
it.
breeding them down there.
Oh, yeah, but how do they incentivize that for the person that caught it?
So
I thought you were going to say
get-
inseminate, but you said incentivize.
I'm getting there. I'm talking about studding out lunkers here in a second. See if we can do this in other walks of life. You know what I mean?
So I think they're trying actually. So they'll take. They have a big banquet at the end of the year, and everyone that's caught a share lunker, they give a replica mount of that fish. Oh, cool. So they will pay for a replica mount. They do a big presentation.
Cool.
You get that replica for free, and then they recognize you, and then your name and everything goes in. They've got a database of every single one that's been caught, what lake it's been caught from, where it was caught, how it was caught, and then you go into that database and kind of into the history books of it.
Awesome.
So you become a legend. Like that's the
Yeah.
cool. They give it back and say, so now this breed, when they track it later, that's all from the fish you caught.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, and you can get that information. Right? I say, like, you can look back and be like, oh, this is the great grandmother of this
Right.
bass that I caught.
That's pretty sweet.
And so, and,
So
and then
wild.
that's proof that it continues to grow. And then, so with that, people want to go to Texas because it's full of big fish.
I imagine that's in the back of your head when you go down there.
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
give me a share lunker
share
when I
lunker.
come down to this tournament, of course.
100%.
Yeah,
And,
everybody does.
Like, that's what I was chasing when I caught that 12-pound 4-ouncer.
Yeah.
Like, I was in Texas trying to catch a share lunker because that's just, that's like the standard.
And we talk about that dopamine dump. Did you think for a second, you were like, oh man, this could be it?
100%. It's on video. It's on my YouTube page, and I
Yeah.
lost it.
Yeah. You're like, oh
That's-
man.
That's got to be a girthy bass. I mean, that's pretty heavy.
It's massive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when it's out there, flopping around on the surface or you set the hook on it, you can't tell the difference between 12 to 13 pounds.
No,
really.
it looks great.
Or at least I can't. I haven't seen enough
massive.
of them.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. I got two questions, two-part question. One, do you think our local area has a population size or stock base sufficient to run a major tournament like that? And two, how much of a competitive advantage would you have?
Those are great questions. We have all of the infrastructure to make it work. As long as our smallmouth populations are healthy in Coeur d'Alene, it could handle it. If it was just largemouth, it would get pretty tricky. And then also depending on what time of year you held it. You know, if you held it May or June, it would be spread out enough that it would work. You know, and then I think you would have to do it you'd have to have multiple tournaments. No one's going to come up here for just a one-off.
Because it's expensive. I mean,
it's
they're making the drives you make all the time.
Exactly, right? So, and majority of the field is from there, so you get a lot more pushback when everyone has to drive up here. And so I think you would have to do like Coeur d'Alene and Pend Oreille, or do Coeur d'Alene potholes, Coeur d'Alene Columbia River, or something, you know, some combination of a minimum of 2 events, and you could make it work. And I think we would have the population base for it. I think you would get people from all over. I've kind of always it's like 2 parts, right? I've dreamt about having a tournament like that on Coeur d'Alene, seeing it down at McEwen Park and having all the booths. Like that is such a perfect place. But to do it there, like you could make the most amazing Elite Series event there, but the city would have to support it in a way that, you know, like may get pushback from other businesses, like, because you're going to need a lot of parking and things, and you're going to need to, you know, close off that ramp and not really leave it open,
right? Because
we're going to have to be able to park, and we can't just park downtown Sherman with our trailers.
Yeah.
You know, so you'd have to make sure you had all those things. But man, from a standpoint of people just be able to walk, and I just imagine this, you know, our beautiful, amazing summers that we have here, and having a bass tournament would be unbelievable. And so then the competitive advantage part, generally guys get beat on their home lakes because they have too much history, and you end up running around places that, you know, you got 20, 30 years of history of catching fish on a place. You don't actually pay attention to what's happening that week, and you overlook a lot of things.
I gotcha. Man, I'm just picturing that, because to me it'd be Blackwell. Blackwell's huge. It's got all the parking there. Like if you could set it up on that, Blackwell Island, you know, and walling that off wouldn't necessarily shaft everybody else.
But isn't that BLM?
Yeah.
So then that's federally controlled, right? So then I don't know how tricky that gets in. Like how much control does the county or the city have in that, right? Where and really to get all the funding, the best way to do it would be actually the state of Idaho kicking in and saying, hey, we're going to put in some money. Kootenai County, you put in some money. Coeur d'Alene, like we'll all get together. Let's promote this and do it that way. I mean, we have the infrastructure to be able to do it. It's just whether or not you can.
It just sounds exciting, because I went on when I was in the service in West Palm Beach. If you were active duty, they signed us up to go jump on a professional bass boat and go with them on a tournament. Yeah. Dude, when it drops and those dudes fly, those things are so... There's 2 things I love seeing about like fishing tournaments. Them hauling ass when they get to go, right? And then them running from a storm is also freaking hilarious, because you'll see boats doing like 70 coming across the lake running from like a Florida storm, because those things sneak up.
Oh, yeah.
And they're vicious.
Oh, yeah.
You get caught up in those. So watching those guys haul ass, just beating the gray wall behind them, trying to get back to the dock, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, and because down there, a lot of times they're not widespread, right? Like usually if we get a storm up here, it's covering half the state most of the time. There, it'll be like just half of the lake.
Yeah, isolated.
You know, like you can see the wall, and you're like, I just have to run south and get away from this thing, and then I can come back.
Right. And then you get stuck in it, and you're just annihilated. Yeah, that would be pretty cool up here.
What makes the difference between like a decent bass fisherman and a pro?
Commitment, usually. I've known a lot of guys that are skill-wise capable of doing it, right? They can catch fish good enough. They understand fish well enough, but they're not willing to give up their day job or the comforts that they have in, whatever life that they've created.
Yep.
And that generally happens, that gets more difficult the older a guy gets. I see it now. Like, I would have a really hard time leaving here if my wife and kids didn't travel and I wasn't already qualified and I was trying to go make it and it wasn't my job.
Oh yeah.
But I was fortunate that early, I knew so early that I was like, I'm going to make it so that I can say this is my job, so that when I meet my future wife, she already knows what's happening. It's not like, hey, honey, I'm going to refi the mortgage on the house so I can go pay entry fees if you don't mind.
Right.
Go chase this dream.
Yeah.
So I think that's what usually keeps guys from doing it.
It's like the same with hunting. You got the guys that put in that get an elk every year, like consistently, and it's because they put in so much back work and they're up in the woods and they're scouting and they're trail cams. And then there's guys like me that go out a couple days a year and like I know I'm probably not going to shoot an elk and it's fine. Like there's that. So it's probably the same kind of thing.
As long as you have the mindset of being okay with it, you're like, great if it happens.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, I'm fine. It's the people that drive me nuts that are like, oh, must be nice.
Oh yeah.
No.
I'm
like, well, how much time did you put in?
Right.
That's the thing. You couldn't get on there, be a keyboard warrior and start talking smack on someone because you didn't kill one and they killed one and you just saw their hunt film that they put out of 2 days of hunting, but they didn't film the other, 10,000 hours of them putting into it.
All the work on the front end.
Yes.
That's an interesting perspective because you got started when you were by yourself, when you could truly commit everything you had to that.
Right. No kids. That was,
nothing. And you put in all that groundwork on the front end. So by then you were already established. You already had a good idea. For those guys that are working 5 days a week and they're like, oh, by the way, I'm going to take all that money I earned these 5 days and go out for the weekend. And
it's hard.
It's a lot more pressure too, I would imagine.
Oh, for sure. I had no risk really.
Yeah.
Right.
It was all uphill. What was the worst case? I was going to run out of money and come back and have to get a job.
Yeah, exactly.
Go back to running heavy equipment and cutting trees down. What?
Eat some ramen. Not a big deal. Dude. We've all been through that stage.
I did make ramen burritos my first year on tour.
But
it wasn't like I qualified and just had all of a sudden had a bunch of money. I was sleeping out of the back of my truck and, eating dehydrated meals that my mom made before I left and things like that. It was pretty low rent at first.
Yeah. Pretty good gig. I'm super curious because you talk about, you really have to know the animal. And I know it's the same way in hunting. And I always wonder because they're isolated to lakes, whether the behavior translates or whether each little subset of bass from different parts of the country do completely different things. Or if you can get bass up here to respond the same as the ones there.
Yeah.
You get what I mean?
Yeah. There's a lot of translation. I'd say there's really 4 species, as far as like 4 main species that we chase. You've got spotted bass, you've got smallmouth, and you've got largemouth. And then largemouth are split into 2 different ones. So you've got Florida strain and northern strain. So we have pure northern strain. As you can imagine, just like the people, the northern strain are much more conditioned to cold weather. They're a lot less affected by temperature swings and cold. The Florida ones, they'll just run and hide. And they just won't bite. I'll just wait till it gets sunny and warm.
Yeah.
And so like you split those 2 because they do act very different. But outside of that, a lot of the same variables apply, right? Because they are surviving based off of the conditions, right? And what senses they have. So their lateral line, their smell, sight, things like that. So whatever conditions they have, right? So if you have clear water and you've got grass, those fish are going to live a certain way versus fish that are maybe in flooded timber and super muddy water. Right? A muddy water fish is going to use their lateral line a lot more because they're going to try to feel the vibrations. They're not used to being sight feeders. And then those fish that are in clear water, they're going to be a lot more sight feeders. So they might be a lot more nomadic. They may hunt their prey down a lot more. They're going to set up on structure differently.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of parts to that.
Yeah.
The longer you do it, the more you just see a situation and you know what to do. You don't have to think about it or think through that process.
Just like sports, you get to a certain point where you just recognize it, you know, right away. That's cool.
Are the bass up here sized differently from being in colder water? Does that change anything on size?
Generally, yes. So your northern largemouth will grow half as fast, but they will live twice as long. So a lot of the, like when California in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was the bass factory of the world as far as 20 plus pound bass. Nowhere could compete with it. And they were what they called F1s. So they were a purebred F1 as a Florida strain and a northern strain combined. So then they transplanted and put those in the Southern California lakes. So you had a bass that would grow twice as fast in a region of the country that was pretty stable and warm most of the time, that also would live twice as long because it had the northern strain part of that. And then you had what I like to call vitamin T, which is trout. And it's such a high protein dense bait fish that it'll grow bass bigger than anything. So like our fish for pure northern strain largemouth, I don't think there's anywhere better in the country. Oh. And our smallmouth get really, really big.
Yeah.
Because of kokanee and trout.
Mm-hmm. Right. What's your take on some of the stuff, especially with Lake Coeur d'Alene? Like pike were an invasive species. They weren't natural to this area. And from what I understand, it was the 90s they got released out of the chain lakes. It was kind of a... Yeah,
most everything here is invasive.
Right.
Outside of, some of your trout species, salmon species. And that's the tricky part with the fish and wildlife, right? Is that they just, and it's their job, but they try to prevent everything from harming the native species, but there also has to be a balance of that, right? Because they also have to be funded. So like you need everything to kind of live in harmony.
Right.
And so it's like you have to manage that. And that's what they do, right? That's why we have fishing regulations, hunting regulations. It's their job to manage that. Sometimes it gets a little out of whack, a little skewed.
Of course.
But I think that from what I've seen is like our fish and wildlife here has seen and identified, bass fishing as actual, like a thing, right? That they should manage and pay attention to, and that we have something special. Right. That's all I can ask for.
Yeah. Have you seen the pike population? What kind of impact does that have on bass population?
Pike they have an impact on everything.
Yeah, because they need
the ecosystem. Right. Yeah, but they'll live in harmony together.
Right.
Once they get to a certain size range, you can definitely tell when there's a bounty on pike. And generally, it's not from the Fish and Wildlife. The tribes seem to do more, pike netting at bounties. I've seen it on Pend Oreille, Washington side, the lower end of Coeur d'Alene. But you notice a difference. Like you won't catch as many pike and small ones. And then generally there is a rebound of bass.
Right.
Takes a few years, but you'll notice like there will all of a sudden be more bass.
Right.
Because there's not as many small ones getting eaten up and stuff.
Yeah.
So it has an impact for sure.
The trout and the bluegill just got to be over there like, whatever, I'm going to get eaten by something.
Yeah.
No matter what. Like, it doesn't matter to me. Yeah. I'm going to get mowed down.
Yeah, if you're a kokanee up here, like you're getting eaten by everything. Like if you're a little kokanee, the perch, the crappie, but like everything's going to eat you. Salmon are going to eat you. Other trout are going to eat you. Like
Yeah. Then later in life, eagles are just going to eat you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Circle of life.
And then as you're just laying there half alive, an eagle's going to swoop down, and there's going to be a bunch of people taking pictures of you getting swooped out in the air.
So beautiful. It's America, right? That's what it is.
What do you have a favorite lake to fish up here? Can you talk about that? I know you probably have a favorite spot. I won't ask you that.
Yeah, Coeur d'Alene's, it's such a diverse fishery. It's a special place.
Yeah.
Scenic wise, I think Pend Oreille is more scenic. You get the monarchs and things like that. But Coeur d'Alene's a special bass fishery. When you compare it to anything in the country, you're not going to catch those 10, 11, 12, 13 pounders.
Yeah.
But for what it is incredible how good it is.
What's your advice because we have a lot of people moving up here that obviously love the outdoors and want to fish. Mm-hmm. Bass fishing Coeur d'Alene first time, like, what do you have advice for people that are new to it?
The biggest thing is, like, our fish are very spot oriented or, location oriented. So it's like identifying specific pieces of cover that those fish are going to live on. And generally the easiest thing to do is start with the smallmouth. They kind of live throughout the entire lake. The smallmouth are going to be around more of your rock, gravel, closer to deep water transitions. And then the largemouth are going to be more back around the grass and, those flatter, shallower bays and things like that. So, the best time to fish around here is typically May, June. It's when a big population of the fish are shallow. They're accessible, and you can catch a bunch of fish. And the weather's generally pretty stable and beautiful that time of year here too.
What about Fernand? Is that good for fishing? That backside?
It's been a long time since I fished Fernand. But yeah, I mean, Fernand's a place that it's like a little mini Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I see a lot of people on the backside where
Yeah.
it's all lilies and
Yep. And that's
grass.
just an access point, right? People can drive back there. It's quiet. There's a lot of access from the bank where they can park on the side of the road and pull out. And, you can go throw a frog around out there and it's fun, right?
Yeah.
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 Oh, yeah.
I see a lot of kids out there fishing.
How about Priest? Do you ever go out there?
Yeah. I used to, when I worked up there building logging roads and stuff, I would actually drag my boat up there and leave it. And then if I got a day off work or something, I would fish Priest.
Yeah.
So it has a bass population in it. It's got largemouth and smallmouth. Very few largemouth.
Right.
But it's pretty good.
Yeah.
You're not going to catch a bunch of giant ones, but it's a cool place. You just feel like you're in another world.
That
Yeah.
place is amazing.
Those three lakes you mentioned, that's what's wild to me. Priest Lake looks so much different than Pend Oreille. I mean, Pend Oreille is unique. You have those huge cliff edges that seem to shoot straight into the water and get deep immediately. And then Coeur d'Alene.
Yeah.
You can drive every one of those and not realize they're within an hour of each other because they look so
Yeah.
uniquely different.
Yep. And that's why it's such a good proving grounds for a tournament bass fisherman. 'Cause
Right.
You get so many different situations. Right. And in the spring, like next spring, we're probably going to have some pretty good snow melt because we've been getting a lot of snow in the mountains this year.
Yeah.
Even though it doesn't look like it down in town.
It is so weird. There's none in town, but there's tons in the mountains.
Yeah, and which is best case scenario, right? So next spring it's going to be flooded, most likely. The water's going to get dirty. The fish are going to act completely different. Summer's going to come around. You're going to be able to see a pop can down there in 20, 25 foot of water, and they'll live completely different then. So you get to see a lot of different conditions in a short amount of time.
Yeah, that's cool.
Favorite tackle shop up here that you can mention, or unless you're not allowed to mention names?
No, I mean, I hate that Becker's tackle shop went out.
It did?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, he had to close the doors after like 10 years, I think.
Bummer.
That's a pretty special place. Blake was he's still around, but he's just not running the store. But he was a special individual to running a tackle shop, right? I mean, I remember when he first opened it up and you'd go in there and there'd just be high school kids hanging out on their lunch break, like hanging out at the counter, right?
That's
And I'm like,
cool.
if I would have had this when I was in school, right? Like that, it was just a hangout place for people that loved bass fishing. Now that that's not there, because he was bass fishing specific. Everything else is mixed. But Black Sheep and North 40 both have a pretty good selection. They've done a good job of, just managing what they have here, and they've gotten a lot better at carrying good products. That's kind of where Blake separated. He carried a lot of the high end stuff that they just wouldn't normally carry, but they've definitely gotten a lot better, in carrying Mega Bass and X Zone and different things like that. That is really cool to see. And I mean, I've been in every state in the entire country, and I still think to this day, Black Sheep has the cheapest prices on a Yamamoto Singo of anywhere in the entire country.
Really?
I don't know how.
That's
It
the thing. Huh?
blows my mind.
You got some little hustle going on there.
But it is like, I haven't been in there in a long time and bought any, but I mean, I remember traveling around and they would, when I first started, they'd be like $3 cheaper than everywhere else in the country.
That's wild.
I have no idea how they did it.
It's a great spot to get ammo too.
It is. When they took over the whole mall, I think everyone was like, how's this going to work out? And then it's like,
It's a ballsy move.
Yeah.
But it seems to be working.
Oh, they're popping up new little stores on the inside and like-minded. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yep. What? So, I mean, how long are you going to keep doing this? You got an end game, or are you just going to keep riding out until you don't like it anymore?
Yeah, I think it's when you're fulfilling a passion, right? Like when that's your quote unquote job. I think you just do it until you don't feel like you enjoy it anymore.
Yeah.
Because the whole reason I wanted to do it is because I wanted to do the thing that I love more than anything.
Which is always a risk when you turn a passion into a job.
Yeah.
Right. It's like sometimes it takes the joy out of it. Does not sound like that's happened to you.
It's taken a lot of like perspective shifts.
Yeah.
Because you can turn anything into feeling like a job, or you can enjoy anything that you do. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like living within your means and having the right perspective to be able to do that. And I've had to shift as my career has changed and I've had kids and stuff. I've just had to kind of shift perspectives so that I didn't get burnt out. Nobody ever gets burnt out on catching fish. It's all the other, time consumable things, traveling to shows and building content and all these things that those essentially keep you away from fishing.
The passionate part.
Like from that addiction from your fingertips to your brain.
Right.
And so you just have to kind of shift on that and realize, that you're still super fortunate that I get to do this.
Yeah.
So I've been able to manage that just because I was aware of that being a thing. So I've been able to stay ahead of it. I set a goal when I first started that at like 50 years old, I would at least like to be in the position financially that I could walk away from it if I wanted to, or I could keep doing it. But at least try to be financially stable where I could minimize the amount of travel I had to do or the amount of sponsorship work. And, I could kind of self-fund a little bit if I needed to. And that's still a long ways away.
Yeah.
That's still
14
years.
What social media platforms are you on? Do you have a website also, or just?
Yeah, I've got a website. It's just bmpfishing.com. And then, because no one could spell my last name.
Yeah,
so
thank you for that.
Most guys, it would be like, their first name, last name.com.
Yeah.
And then I knew early on from my wrestling days, like, no one's going to be able to say it. No one's going to be able to spell it, even if they could say it. So no one would ever find my website.
I never underestimate people. My last name's Boardman, and that never gets spelled right. So there's no dice, dude. No dice.
So I was like, initials, fishing, perfect. And then Instagram, YouTube, Facebook.
And so on those channels, you're putting out content of fishing, basically.
Yeah, fishing content, fishing
porn.
stuff, fishing, hunting, everything. I mean, it's just a glimpse into the life of what we're doing, some educational stuff,
cool.
Some funny stuff. But yeah, it's just, a little bit of everything.
Really. I'll link all of those in the show notes for people to look you up and find you on there, of course.
Here's what I've taken from this.
Yeah. Here's the breakdown.
No. Fingertips to brain. It's the healthy lake fentanyl is bass fishing.
Yeah.
That's good. That's what I like.
That's a good way to put it.
That's pretty cool.
I mean, that's what. Yeah, if it was like a cost-effective way to just put drug addicts into rehab on lakes.
Yeah,
there's probably something to that, right? You get them catching fish, and it's they're getting that dopamine hit.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of organizations that do that. With military veteran guys struggling with PTSD, Huge. They get them on the water, and it gives them something.
Yeah, right? Gives you that bump. I mean, that
and I love that, and it requires an amount of focus. Can give you some purpose and things like that, and so you see a lot of guys get attached to that.
Do you take people out ever?
Yeah. It's limited just because my time's limited. Usually do a couple auction trips a year for charity things. If veteran deals like that come up, it's usually a no-brainer if time-wise I can make it work.
Cool.
Because I'm all about supporting that and those guys. So
we have a big veteran event coming up, the Ruck March in May.
Yeah.
I'll hit you up. Maybe we can figure something out.
Yeah, I may actually be here, depending on when it is in May.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beginning of May.
It's a fun event. Starts in McEwen. 3 miles out, 3 miles back, whole bunch of new beginnings and a whole bunch of other veterans supported.
Rock for the Fallen. And it's a food drive too, so that all the food, I think, what did we get, like 4,000 or 5,000 pounds of food last year? It was pretty substantial. That went to New Beginnings,
Dang. How much weight are you carrying?
Ramen, crackers.
Top ramen and saltines, bro.
Yeah.
My pack looks huge.
Yeah.
Come on, you're bigger than that.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, that was a lot of fun, and it brings a lot of good people together. So we have such an amazing community up here of veterans and first responders and just everybody. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Love it. We got you a gift. It's a large, so it might be a little big, but it's an athletic fit. It's the only one we had in size.
I can start bulking.
Yeah.
There we
you
go.
go. It's a goal.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So that's our brand for North Idaho Experience, and then it's got a cool picture on the back too.
Nice.
We are going to be selling those soon.
Is that the cell tower that sits out there over Beauty Bay?
It looks like it, doesn't it? Yeah.
We have a cell
It
tower
only
on the shirt.
looks like it because it's just like a
hilarious.
single tree. And
Right.
you look up and you're like,
Thank you.
looks
Now
like
I'm
a
never going to
tree.
unsee that.
Yeah.
Damn, cell tower. Yeah. But the back is it's got a
no,
cool.
it looks better.
Yeah.
And if you can see that on camera, North Idaho Experience.
Oh yeah, that is cool.
Yeah. So merch is coming soon. Pretty excited
Yep.
about it. We got some cool ideas. It's just kind of a fun thing for us to do too. Like, it's a great way to get our brand out there, and it's not real estate. Like nobody gives a shit about real estate. That's a fact. So
Unless they're actually just buying a house.
yeah,
Right.
then they do, right? But yeah, nobody's gonna wear a shirt that says like real estate.
No.
Cool.
No, this has been cool. Check out Brandon's channel.
Yeah,
with,
we will link it.
Bass fishing. I didn't realize that we had such a strong fishery up here for it. Maybe it's because I can't ever effing catch anything. But
You know a
apparently
guy
there's
out.
some
You know a
skill.
guy.
Yeah, apparently there's some
Just
skill
knowing that
goes
it
into
can happen,
Yes.
that gives me hope,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a
Compete with myself.
I'll have to try. I haven't. I've fly fishing lately, but I haven't like fished on the lakes out here. So I'll have to give it a whirl.
We've got grand plans this year. Well,
Yeah.
I swear we'll have more time one day, dude.
Yeah.
One day we'll have time to go do something like that.
Someday.
That's what we all say.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the next project.
Well, Brandon Palaniuk, I got it right twice.
Yes.
See, I had to look at my notes, so I cheated.
Yeah.
Thank you, bro.
Yeah.
Like this question comes up a lot. People are always curious about fishing up here, and so I think we answered some questions today. I
Yeah.
really appreciate your time.
That was awesome. I appreciate you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
fun.
good to meet you, bro.
Likewise.
Yep.
All right, catch you next time.
See you
Bye.
guys.